Full name Thomas Stearns, Stearns, Stearns Eliot. Born in America, then he moved to England. So, American English poet, as well as a playwright and critic. So, when you think of T.S. Eliot as a modernist poet, of course, this poem will come to your mind, The Wasteland, published in October 1922. So, last month, October 2022, it completed 100 years. So, last month, the 100th anniversary of The Wasteland was celebrated worldwide. So, that's a significant landmark when it comes to literature. And number of lines in this poem, 433. Sometimes it is calculated as 434. Some discrepancy, but this data is based on Encyclopedia Britannica, 433. If you go for Wikipedia or other sources, they go for 434. Okay, so there's a question mark, but we'll stick with 433 because I also referred a critical interpretation of this book where they go for 433. And it was published in the Criterion, the magazine founded by T.S. Eliot himself. So these are some of the questions. Who founded the journal called the Criterion? That could be T.S. Eliot. And this question was often asked earlier in NET exams. How many sections are there in the poem The Wasteland? Sometimes they will also ask you to arrange the section in the order. So this is the order. This poem, The Wasteland, has 5 sections. Number 1, the burial of the dead. 2, a game of chess. 3, the fire sermon. 4, death by water. 5, what the thunder said. If you get time, I will try to teach this poem in class, but it could be a long class because we have to go through 433 lines. Okay. So for the time being, just remember the order. At least, okay, first is the burial of the dead, and final one, what the thunder said. And The Wasteland was dedicated to Ezra Pound. And this is the dedication. Il Miglio Fabbro, ILMIGLIOR, Fabbro, FABBRO, Italian. It means a better craftsman. T.S. Eliot says, he is better than me. Ezra Pound, the poet, American poet, is better than me in terms of art. And anyone on the screen, you have a definition. That which presents an intellectual and emotional complex in an instant of time. Can anyone tell me it is a definition of what given by Ezra Pound? Or just guess, Ezra Pound is associated with a group of, I would say, a school of poetry. Anyone? He is known for Ezra Pound. When you say Ezra Pound or William Carlos Williams or Hilda Doolittle, these are some of the names associated with a particular kind of poetry, which gives emphasis on more on concrete. Anyone? Can you finish it off? Yes, images. Imagist poet. And this is the definition of image given by Ezra Pound. That which presents an intellectual and emotional complex in an instant of time. This definition you should remember, because in the upcoming days, if there is a descriptive kind of an exam, right, and you are writing about Ezra Pound or imagism, definitely you should quote this one. Ezra Pound defines image as that which presents an intellectual and emotional complex in an instant of time. What does it mean? It simply means, says, see, just when you read a poem, especially Ezra Pound, influenced by Japanese poetry and other poems, Chinese, images poet, they just want to present an image that will provoke a lot of thoughts in your mind, intellectually and emotionally, just in a snap of a finger. So that is the power of an image. So that's how he defines image. And why this poem is dedicated to Ezra Pound? Because Ezra Pound edited The Wasteland. Because when T.S. Eliot wrote the poem Wasteland, it was around 800 lines. Thank God, Ezra Pound reduced it to or perfected it to 433 lines. So that's why it was dedicated to Ezra Pound. I think my guess would be that the fourth section, Death by Water, is the shortest one of the 5 sections in the poem. That section could be influenced by Ezra Pound because it is more imagistic. That's what my guess would be that. And this line, Datta Daitvam Damyata, one of the often quoted lines from the Wasteland, the poem, from Brihadaranya Upanishad. It was taken from Brihadaranya Upanishad from Hindu mythology or Hindu philosophy. And these are some of the years you should know. 1927, T.S. Eliot converted from Roman Catholicism to Anglicanism. And he also, earlier, he had moved from America to England. In 1927, he also got his British citizenship. So that's why this year plays a major role. His conversion to Anglicanism, and he got his British citizenship. 1948, he was awarded one of the prestigious medals in England, Order of Merit. Then Nobel Prize for Literature, 1948. And on the left, what you see is his own self-description. Classical in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. This is how he defines himself. And the focus should be on the word classical. According to T.S. Eliot, classical is more rule-bound, and it also shows that you have mastered literature. Though you are able to bend the classic to give the give some expression to the modern world. So he calls himself classical. And royalist, he supports royals. Then his religion, Anglo-Catholic religion. When it comes to questions, this is how they ask questions. Who or which modernist describes himself or herself as classical in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion? Of course, T.S. Eliot. Next, when we, after the Wasteland, 1922, when we think of his famous poem, this is a famous poem published in 1915, earlier one, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, written immediately after starting of World War I, 1914. So very famous poem in which you have a modern man, confused, shy, and in a dilemma. And some of his confusions, famous confusion. Do I dare to eat a peach? And this alludes to, or a kind of a satiric take on, Hamlet's question, to be or not to be. For the prince Hamlet, the question during his lifetime was different to approach the world. But here is a modern man, Alfred Prufrock, very shy. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. And the climate, the political climate of the entire world is different. And he is very shy of eating peach. That's his problem, whether to eat peach or not in the presence of women, high-class women. Because these women, in the room, the women come and go talking of Michelangelo. Because Michelangelo, a poet who appealed to especially the elite society of London. So here is an ordinary man who is very shy of entering these high-class women and society. And he says, do I dare to eat a peach in their presence? Then he declares, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was I meant to be. I'm just an ordinary man. These are some of the often quoted lines. I'm not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm just Alfred Prufrock. Then this is the poem you should remember. When you say T.S. Eliot, first Wasteland, then The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, then this collection, Four Quartets. Name itself says quartets. So you have 1943, published in 1943, you have 4. Earlier, this was asked as a question. What are the 4 components or sections of 4 quartets? Number 1, Burnt Norton, based on the element of fire. Air. Burnt Norton, element of air. East Cocker, element of earth. Then dry salvages, element of water. Little Gidding, fire. So based on elements of nature, he composed these 4 quartets. So if there is a question, they might ask question like this. Okay, which poem? Earlier they have finished off all these questions. How many name of the works under 4 quartets? So they will no longer ask this simple question. What are the 4 poems in 4 quartets? That's an easy question now. Definitely they will go for in-depth questions like this. Burnt Norton, air, east conquer, earth, then dry salvages, water, little getting, fire. Then this line. So when you think of T.S. Eliot, immediately think of the Wasteland, love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, 4 quartets, then the Hollow Men. Hollow Men refers to, I think personally, it refers to the soldiers, 1914, soldiers who laid their life, or the modernist people, or modernist men and women, the hollow men. They are empty, nothing. So first one, Mr. Kurtz, he did, one of the epigraphs of the hollow men. Mr. Kurtz, the Kurtz here, I mean the character is a character from, it's an allusion, it's a character from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I hope you know the story of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. If not, please read. Anyone who is the narrator of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness? This man goes to Africa and Kurtz is already there mingling with native people and kind of involved in ivory trade. So anyone knows the narrator of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness? We will also discuss this when we discuss narratology, art of storytelling, where this character, I mean, yes, Marlowe narrates his story to a group of sailors. So it's a kind of story within a story, kind of a technique, frame narrative. We'll discuss this later. And this is an often quoted line. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Very beautiful line. So don't expect fireworks in life sometimes. It's just sometimes ordinary. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Then let's go. I hope you remember this line from Virginia Woolf's famous essay, Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Brown, in which she comments on T.S. Eliot's work. Mr. Eliot has written some of the loveliest single lines in modern poetry. And I think I have already quoted this line. I have measured out my life in coffee spoons. Often quoted line. I think from J. Alfred Prufrock, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And old possum, remember the word old possum, it could be a question. Old possum, P-O-S-S-U-M, possum refers to cat. So old possum was a pseudonym used by T.S. Eliot for a collection of poetry. We will discuss that collection. So this is the collection. Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. So it's kind of a musical. I mean, this poetry collection is kind of alliterative and it goes on and on. Old Possum is a pseudonym used by T.S. Eliot here. There are other famous poems, Geronation and Ash Wednesday. Right? So this is his poetic phase. And this collection, Ariel Poems. Ariel Poems, it was asked by this publishing company, Faber and Faber. Faber and Faber, the publishing company asked, the publishing house asked T.S. Eliot to come up with poems to be printed as a booklet and distributed as a gift during Christmas. So he wrote this, Ariel Poems. Journey of the Magi, a song for Simon, Mariana, Animala, Triumphal March. So during December, before Christmas, this booklet or this poem was printed as a booklet and distributed in shops and other places. It's just kind of a Christmas gift. Okay. Then a few years later, one more was written, The Cultivation of Christmas Trees. So you can say Ariel Poems, totally 6 poems. 5 plus 1. The one was written later, but generally 5 poems. Journey of the Magi, often prescribed, very famous one. A song for Simon or Simon. Then Mariana, Animala, Triumphal March, and the cultivation of Christmas trees. So now you have to remember certain things. So when you think of Ariel, what comes to your mind? Which character in literature comes to your mind? Or there is also a collection, Ariel, by an American poet known for her confessional poetry. Her poetry collection is also Ariel. And as the first one, when we say Ariel, immediately you will think of The Tempest, right? Then you can think of Sylvia Plath, confessional poetry, because one of her major collections, Ariel. Then you can also think of a romantic poet who drowned near the Italian coast, and the ship or the boat on which in which he traveled is also called Ariel, or he called that boat Ariel, and he drowned in the Italian he caught in the tempest. And that guy actually wrote Adonai, and towards the end of Adonai, he said almost he predicted his end. So when we discuss Adonai, you will know, Shelley almost, predicted his death. It seems he wrote that poem for himself, not for John Keats. It's an elegy on the death of John Keats. But towards the end, he talks more about water and kind of thing. It seems he predicted his end. So this is how you can connect things. Ariel, think of characters. If there is any other Ariel, let me know. So these are some of the Ariels we should know. So Ariel poems, T.S. Eliot, then Sylvia Plath, then Shelley, then you have Shakespeare's The Tempest. There's also another work, maybe a kind of intertextual character called Ariel. There is a play called A Tempest, not The Tempest, A Tempest. A Tempest, find out who wrote the play A Tempest. Very famous French, not French, he wrote it in French, in which it's a kind of attacking the Tempest. Okay, so we'll discuss that later, but just to find out who wrote Ariel. Good. There's also another Ariel in The Rape of the Lock by Pope. Okay, fine. So these are some of the Ariels we have. Let's go. Then Journey of the Magi, 1927, published. It was a dramatic monologue. Of course, you know which Victorian poet was known for dramatic monologue. So it's not, when you say dramatic monologue, it has nothing to do with the drama. So it's a monologue, a single person delivering something. So it's in the form of poetry, a dramatic monologue. And there are three kings, right? 3 kings who visited. Okay, we have got the 𝐀𝐫𝐨𝐮𝐧𝐝 is he wrote A Tempest, right? Then Browning is known for, Robert Browning is known for a dramatic monologue. There are a lot of dramatic monologues. When we get time, we will discuss some of the dramatic monologues. But here, of the 3 Magi, the 3 kings, the journey to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, was remembered by one of the Magus, Magi, no, the one Magus. It's a free verse, 43 lines, 3 stanzas. The first 20, they are looking back on the journey. So now the Magus, old, about to die, he is looking back on the journey to Bethlehem. Then the second section or stanza, arrival in Bethlehem. Then now present, the old man thinking of birth of Christ, death of Christ, also his death. Okay. And what is more important here is that there is a famous line, no longer at ease, in Journey of the Magi. And you know 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫𝐬, known for his famous work, Things Fall Apart. And the title of this novel, No Longer at Ease, is taken from Journey of the Magi. Of course, you know, Things Fall Apart. Anyone? The title of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵's Things Fall Apart is taken from another very famous poem, but different author. Is The Second Coming. Second Coming by Things Fall Apart. The title taken from 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵 took the title from the poem Second Coming. Who wrote Second Coming? And you can, yes, W.B. Yeats. Things Fall Apart. How can we remember? Sometimes I get confused because of this two title, which is taken from which. Just remember, Things Fall Apart talks about the first coming of the Europeans, the colonizers to Africa, and it talks about their coming and also the arrival of Christianity, the first coming of Christianity to the African land, and also the colonizer. So you can remember, okay, that it talks about the first coming of colonizers, so it's taken from the second coming. Sometimes you have some clue like this. Then this one no longer is taken from Journey of the Magi. Then we have T.S. Eliot as a playwright. So you have the rock, the family reunion, the cocktail party, the confidential clerk, the elder statesman. And here is an interesting word, Sweeney agonistus. We have already discussed the word agon, means contest, or agonistus means contestant, a wrestler, champion. These are some of the translations. We have already discussed this under poetics, when we discuss poetics, Aristotle's poetics. Sweeney agonistus, fragments of an Aristophanic melodrama. Aristophanes, father of Greek comedy. And who wrote Samson Agonistus? So connect the things. You have Samson Agonistus by a Puritan poet. Then you have Sweeney Agonistus, a modern poet. Both are connected by their religion and passion for God, right? Milton. Fine. So connect Samson Agonistus with Sweeney Agonistus. The next one. When you say T.S. Eliot as a playwright, this is the play we often read, Murder in the Cathedral, on the death of Thomas Becket. And this line is often quoted from this beautiful work. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. Sometimes we have to create illusions to escape from realism, which is very harsh. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. This line is from Murder in the Cathedral. Then as a critic, so we looked at him as a poet, now as a playwright, now as a critic. So when we say T.S. Eliot, one of his often read essay, The Metaphysical Poets, in which he talks about the difference between metaphysical poets and modern poets. Modern in the sense 17th century poets. So metaphysical poets, 16th century, he talks about John Donne, Abraham Cowley, and others. He said the metaphysical poets possessed a mechanism of sensibility. They have a formula which could devour any kind of experience. He is talking about metaphysical conceit. So in the future, if you are going to write an essay on metaphysical conceit or on metaphysical poets, you should quote this T.S. Eliot's essay, or else that essay is incomplete. In Metaphysical Poets, I mean this essay, T.S. Eliot says, John Donne and co, they had a sensibility, unification of sensibility. He uses the word, uses this phrase, unification of sensibility. What do they unify or blend? They blend thought and feeling, something that appeals to your heart and something that appeals to your mind, both. They are able to unite thought and feeling. They didn't divide that. Right? If you read their poems, especially their metaphysical concepts, they are able to think as well as feel. That is there. They had that sensibility, unification of sensibility or a mechanism of sensibility. But after the 17th century, with the arrival of modern poets, especially Milton and Dryden, John Milton and John Dryden, a disassociation of sensibility set in. Disassociation in the sense there is a division. Thought is different, feeling is different. They say thought belongs to science, feeling belongs to literature. So this division comes in. This dissociation of that sensibility sets in the 17th century because of John Milton and Dryden. So in the future, when we get time, we will read this essay in full, the Metaphysical Poets. For the time being, we are skipping, just looking at the gist of this essay. Next, when we say T.S. Eliot as a critic, tradition and the individual talent. in which he proposes this theory, impersonal theory of art. Why impersonal? In a sense, if you have to be a critic or if you want to be a poet, you have to negate your personality. Your personality should not get reflected in what you write. So if you write a poem, your personality should not get reflected in that poem. It should be objective, right? So he came up with a kind of formula, chemistry, oxygen plus sulfur dioxide. You have this in a chamber, glass chamber. In that chamber, we have a filament, platinum filament, which acts as a catalyst. I hope you remember your basics, chemistry. So function of a catalyst is speed up the process, right? The entire process. And the end result, we have sulfurous acid. So oxygen plus sulfur dioxide, we have sulfurous acid. But in sulfurous acid, we do not find a trace of this filament, platinum filament, because the purpose of platinum filament is it's a catalyst, speed up the process, but the presence of platinum filament won't be available in the end result. Similar way, as a poet or the poet's mind is a receptacle. It's a kind of a vessel in which the poet, he or she, collects emotions and feelings, not only his or her, around the world, among all the people, then convert that into poetry. But the end result should not have the personality of the poet, right? The person should negate his personality from what he writes or she writes. So this is the simplistic kind of my way of explaining this one. So we will also try to discuss tradition and the individual talent, or remember this, impersonal theory of art by T.S. Eliot. Why this is important? Because T.S. Eliot sometimes is brought under a school of criticism. Anyone? Which school of criticism includes T.S. Eliot? In that school of criticism, we have 𝐀𝐫𝐨𝐮𝐧𝐝, who talks about paradox, the language of paradox. Alan Tate, tension in poetry. Why this school of criticism? Because it is new criticism, not the new criticism, new criticism. New criticism, good. So new criticism, they give importance to the particular text. They don't bother about the author's background or historical period. So that is the school of criticism, new criticism. When we discuss theory, we will discuss all the school of criticism in detail. I'm just planting a seed here. T.S. Eliot is associated with the new criticism because he believes in impersonal theory of art. Author should not be brought, or the biography of author should not be brought into the interpretation of the work. So that is one of the tenets of new criticism. So think of new criticism, think of this work, T.S. Eliot's this work, tradition and the individual talent. See, you have a literary tradition, right? And you have individual talent. Each poet has an individual talent, but each individual talent should be a point in a continuum. So you have a tradition, it goes on and on. So you have to place yourself somewhere here. Okay, maybe Tamil poetry, you have Bharati, or before you have Sangam poem. I am here. So we also have lyricists, famous lyricists here, where I am in that continuum. You can't say, I am the first one to do this. I am the second. Hey, there is a tradition. First, aware of the tradition and place yourself, not yourself, your poetry in that continuum. Okay. So aware of your literary tradition and judge yourself where you stand. So that is the title, tradition and the individual talent. Hamlet and His Problems, published in 1919. Then the same work is published in his famous essay collection, 1920 essay collection, The Sacred Wood. And that could be a question. The Sacred Wood is a collection of essays by T.S. Eliot, published in 1920, in which we also have Hamlet and His Problems. When we think of Hamlet and His Problems, this is the phrase now kind of a literary term, objective correlative. The term was coined by Washington Allston in his work Lectures on Art and Poems. I'm not explaining this now, but we are going to discuss this in detail. Because when we think of Hamlet and His Problems, this is the question often asked. They will ask, in which work T.S. Eliot used objective correlative? In which work he used dissociation of sensibility? These are the two terms often asked. So you have to remember objective correlative in Hamlet and His Problems, you know, where dissociation of sensibility comes in, Metaphysical Poets. So remember both these things. Thank you so much.